Gun-Free South Africa urges the government to re-establish the specialist firearms units in the Western Cape. It comes amid a number of shootings in the province, which has left more than 100 people dead in 1 week. Gun-Free South Africa reiterates that gun confiscation is just not enough. The City of Cape Town is in agreement calling for removal of guns from the street. Let's speak now to Cape Town Community Safety MMC JP Smith. Mr. Smith, good evening. Appreciate your time. The Western Cape has recently experienced a significant rise in gang activity and gun violence. What do you believe are the key factors contributing to this increase in violence?
Good evening. I've stepped out of a function quickly to do this, and thank you for the question. I think that one must begin to point out that what we are opposed to is illegal guns on our streets. Gun-Free South Africa has a slightly different take on the broader debate around firearm control, and there is a very basic reality. If you look at the shootings that have happened in Cape Town, they involve mass shootings, gang hits, or street gang warfare. All of them have a common denominator, and that is syndicated crime or organized crime. And what is failing here is two things. One, the abundant availability of illegal firearms, unregulated firearms, and that has a lot to do with poor firearm control in relation to, for instance, the availability of stolen firearms that were stolen from the National SAPS Armory. We know that a senior SAPS official was convicted and subsequently again released on medical parole, and that he was convicted for over 3,000 firearms, but it is estimated that closer to 9,000 firearms were stolen from that armory with his or the help of other persons and sold to predominantly taxi syndicates or gangs. And the second part that I think is contributing seriously to this problem is the lack of conviction. So if you look at your gang conviction rate, it's below 2%. And anywhere in the world, that would be deemed a crisis. You would have a massive makeover of your criminal justice system. But what we've seen here is the acceptance by the state of really, really low conviction rates that shouldn't be tolerated. And these are unfortunately not systems that the city or provincial government control. Your investigative power of SAPS, the National Prosecuting Authority, the Department of Justice, the Department of Correctional Services, these are national agencies. And until we get effective specialized units that are prosecutorially and investigatively led, that are getting those conviction rates up for our organized crime in Cape Town and in the rest of South Africa, these organized syndicates are going to continue to do more and more harm. As the state fails, they will come to play a larger and larger role in what you often hear termed the mafia state. And this is the failure of the criminal justice system to deal with organized crime.
Now, Mr. Smith, there are a couple of issues that you mentioned, and one of those is the conviction rate for gangsters or those in similar trades, if you will. And you said it's around 2%. Now, you also speak about the need to bring in special agencies or teams to deal with these issues. So the question, I suppose, is SAPS and the current justice system failing South Africans?
I think that question is an easy one, yes. And it is self-evident. It doesn't require a complex analysis of the matter. The stats at this stage are blatantly self-evident across South Africa. In fact, in the last period, we've seen national murder rates go up 15%. In that same time, Western Cape murder rates have come down. The investments we've made in LEAP and in the safety plan and in other investments relating to safety and technology has seen murder come down. But I will tell you that is through the deployment of visible policing resources and creating larger police saturation or deployment ratios. For instance, in Cape Town CBD, as a joint project of the provincial government and the city, 1,200 extra boots on the ground in the 12 most pressurized high crime rate areas in the city, the 12 precincts with the highest crime. That is only going to go so far. If your shooters are recurrent shooters, as they are, if the same people are engaging in the same shooting incidents regularly, we arrest one, we see them out on parole again, at some point you're going to have to fix that revolving door. You're going to have to get the persons who perpetrate these murders off the street. the gang murder rate is below 2%. And I can tell you that because we now do careful watching briefs with our Safety and Security Investigations Unit, what the National Minister likes to refer to as the Rogue Unit, because we're actually watching what's happening with our cases, I'm now in a position to tell you that over a period of 22 months, the city confiscated 674 firearms from the street. We're doing pretty well. We're batting or punching well above our weight range. Out of those, we've managed to get only 6 convictions. So that's a 0.089% conviction rate, wholly inadequate. And that is absolutely clear to me that the criminal justice system is in a very frail state. A national government's going to have to make investments. And the first investment is bolstering your detective services. We're something like 8,600 detectives short around the country. When I speak to detectives in Cape Town, it's common for them to have 200 to 300 or more dockets on their table. Realistically, they can investigate 15 to 25. The rest, I'm afraid, is justice foregone. And there is the low-hanging fruit that the state needs to start with.
Now, Mr. Smith, you're the MMC for Safety and Security. There have been over 100 deaths, gun-related, I think, in the last month in the Western Cape. So your job must be both frustrating and extremely difficult. When we take a look at what is your measure of success, I mean, what are your key performance areas? Because if you're safety and security, there doesn't appear to be much safety in the Western Cape.
So with these kind of incidents, you will understand that that statistics will go up and down all the time. And so we have outbreaks. During the taxi violence, we saw an increase in violent crime when our resources were distracted from being in the communities where they should have been because they were dealing with the violence perpetrated by the taxi syndicates. During May, there was a flare-up in gang violence, unprecedented, with a very sudden spike in additional firearms coming onto the street and additional gang activity. And so in May, we saw a flare-up. And so there will periodically be these flare-ups and additional stats. But what you must look at is the trends, and that's the reason I cited the stats earlier that shows you that we've had an 11% decrease in murder rate, while in the rest of South Africa, that murder rate has been heading steadily up. That's no accident. That is the confluence of additional boots on the ground, extra training, an additional focus on information-led policing and investigations, and us impacting with watching briefs and otherwise on the criminal justice system, a very substantial investment in technology, and closer working relationship with SAPS. We've pushed for things like a task team, an operational task team around kidnapping and extortion. The kidnapping part has happened. The extortion part seems to be starting up now. This is the end result of many years of lobbying of SAPS, where SAPS is starting to accept that they are not fixing these problems on their own and are starting to accept the contribution that the city can make. But keep in mind that if you go and look at the Constitution in Schedules 4 and 5B, it's very clear about who does what. In those schedules, local government is responsible for traffic and bylaw enforcement, the much less dramatic traffic and bylaw enforcement. That's our core constitutional competency. But because we've seen steadily receding resources from SAPS over the years, we've had to increasingly step up and spend more and more money. For LEAP, for instance, the joint venture between us and the province with the 1,200 extra officers, that's a 1.8 billion rand investment that we've had to make, taking resources away from our core competencies to plug the hole left by wholly inadequate SAPS deployment. SAPS is about half the level, or a little bit less than half the level of deployment they should be. And so we're fixing these problems with provincial and local government funding, trying to step into the breach, but we have neither the resources nor the powers. And those powers have been steadfastly denied us. Hence, you will see the mayor and the premier and myself and others constantly engaging SAPS and national government around devolving policing powers to local government, to provincial government, and in fact handing over control of SAPS to the provincial government so that we can show that we know what to do with it and that we'll be able to resource and manage that entity better.
Final question, Mr. Smith. If the control of SAPS was devolved to local government, what are the first steps of action that you would take, and where do you envision crime stats would be relative to where they are at the moment?
If we're at SAPS pulling in the same direction as the limited resources we brought to bear with our investigations and information management and LEAP and gang and drug task team and other small little specialized units with our limited resources, I think that we would be able to double those current gains we've had. That 11% gain we've had, we could have made that a 22% gain. And I would start with the detectives. Our detectives are massively under-resourced. So before you add another 2,600 general boots to SAPS, the goal must be to train and deploy additional detectives. And that's not a quick overnight fix, because the training has to be adequate training. It's not a 2-week training course. This is a meaningful investment in detectives. Along with that must go modernization, something that was recognized by the National Development Plan more than a decade ago and simply left untouched by the national government. SAPS has been left in a very anachronistic state. They are sitting with technology that's 2 decades old. There's been no modernization meaningfully in that National Police Service. It's got no computer-aided dispatching systems. It's got very limited connectivity and communication systems. It is in a sad state in that regard. And that's something that we can fix. We're already fixing it, and we intend to try and pull SAPS on board through the Safer Cities agreement that we have with them. If they stick to that agreement, we will give them the benefit of the investments we're making. And then the rest is around discipline and training and consequence management and dealing with an increasingly collapsing culture of discipline and integrity systems within your National Police Service. And, I mean, you just have to look at the Kinnear murder and the internal politics within the police around that to understand what I'm referring to.
JB Smith is the Western Cape's MMC for Safety and Security. Appreciate you making time in your busy schedule to speak to us